Welcome to a fantastic edition of Rebellion's educational series. Walt Disney World captures the imagination of adults, children, gigantic corporate CEOs. Everyone finds their inner self in Walt Disney World, almost everyone. Today we have a very special guest, Dan Cockerell, who oversaw the Magic Kingdom, now runs his own consulting firm, and is here to answer all questions Magic Kingdom. Thank you so much, Dan, for coming on.
Thanks, Alex. I'm excited to be here.
The pleasure is all ours. So many of my friends, including myself, are Disney obsessed. I personally have been to Disney maybe a dozen times and find a certain relaxation or kind of mental sanctuary in Disney World that I can't find anywhere else. Is that something you've seen with many of your clients or guests, rather?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it's funny you say that because that's why Walt Disney created Disneyland, the first theme park. His idea was, he used to take his two daughters to the local carnival, and it was kind of dirty. It wasn't really well run. And he just thought, there must be a better way. There must be a better way for families to sort of escape reality and spend quality time together and create memories together and really immerse them in an experience. And he created that. He wanted to take his animated films and make them three-dimensional. So you stepped into them and you would see and smell and feel and hear everything that he wanted you to experience. And that's exactly what Disney's been doing ever since, thinking not only to have things run efficiently, but psychologically to put it in a place where people feel comfortable and they really can relax and spend great time together and create those memories.
Is Magic Kingdom a 24-hour kind of, is there ever like a time where nobody's there, it's totally off, or is it essentially on all the time to some extent?
Yeah, there's constantly activity at the Magic Kingdom. I mean, we operated, depending on the season, up to 18 hours a day. Usually we really had to have at least 8 or 9 hours between closing and opening to be able to get the maintenance teams in to do their preventive maintenance on attractions and do the cleaning, the pressure washing. Horticulture has to get in there to switch out the plants. But I'll tell you, as soon as that gate closes at night, the gates in the back open and about 500 people come out, contractors, construction people, maintenance people, artists. They go into the attractions, they do the testing, they touch up the animatronics. It's a whole city at night also. So we always talked about, we wish we could have more hours in the day because there's just not enough hours to be able to stay open for the volume of guests we had and to give it the TLC it needed to keep it, really looking good.
Wow. So when a ride like Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, is it just due to the fact that it's a 50-year-old ride and there's only so much you can do to bring it up to today?
I would say a lot of the systems have been updated. There's many reasons for attractions to not work. A lot of times we've added, safety sensors and safety procedures over time. And the more sensors you add, the more opportunity you have for a false sensor or a sensor that works. If someone gets out of a boat, they put their foot in the wrong place, it's going to shut the attraction down. And then you have just physics and wear and tear. The moving sidewalks, the escalators, all the machines. We try to anticipate and really calculate what the life of one of the components is going to be and change it out before it fails. But there are things that happen, and the target at Walt Disney World is over 96 or 97% maintenance readiness, which means we ask them that we want it to run at least 97% reliably while we're open. And that's not easy to get there. Once you get above 80%, each extra percentage point costs a lot of money. Yes. And it's a lot of focus, but they're so important to the overall experience. There's a lot of work and a lot of engineering and procedures that go into to try to keep them up and running all the time.
The incremental margin is so much of what makes Walt Disney so special. Well, moving from maintenance to safety, active gun shooter, one has to assume it'll happen eventually at Walt Disney World. It's happened everywhere around America. It's something that doesn't seem to be going away. How well prepared is Disney for that?
Yeah, Disney, I mean, obviously, Disney World was one of the first areas to put in bag checks and now full magnetometers, metal detectors. Uh, there is a lot of training that goes in with security. The company works closely with the FBI, Homeland Security. There's a lot of what we call layers of security at Walt Disney World. So, we have training. We train on that. We train on a hurricane. We train on an active shooter. We train on a tornado. We train on an attraction accident. And that's a big part of what we do. Every year we have tabletop training where you put everyone in a room and you sort of play out a scenario. And it seems to be just as stressful as a real scenario because you get caught up in the moment. Okay, who are you going to call now? What are you going to do now? How are you going to handle this? What are you going to do with your guests? And we go through that training all the time. In fact, we trained for hurricanes for almost over a decade and never had a hurricane. And then back in the early 90s, we had 3 within a couple months, and everyone was ready because we trained for those moments that maybe happen once in a lifetime, but you got to be ready for them. And that's a big focus. The brand, people expect to be safe. And even if something happens that isn't supposed to happen, we need to be ready to react to that. And we work closely with law enforcement and do drills and simulations to play out those scenarios. That you have to have a plan to manage the best you can.
So if there's an active shooter at Peter Pan, that scenario has been played out.
Well, typically you won't necessarily play it out in every venue. We could talk to law enforcement. There's always guiding principles and procedures on how communication is going to happen. The first 20 minutes of any emergency is so key. Clearing the area, getting if the first responders in there, and then once the 20 minutes goes by, then obviously you have a lot of other people that can respond. We have duty managers in the park who are responsible to take over when an emergency happens in the park, respond to, if an ambulance is called, which is called often at Disney. It's like a small city. People are dehydrated, people faint, people get they cut their leg on something, and obviously sometimes much worse. But everyone kind of understands the guiding principles and has checklists of, okay, what are you going to do in the first 20 minutes? Because after that, like I said, the professionals arrive, the police arrive, the fire department arrives, and this is all they do for a living. So what we've really tried to train our people on is, what are you going to do the first 20 minutes to get to the place where people who can handle these much better than we can are there.
So the Disney private security force, how long would it take them to deploy if there were a potential shooter? I'm sorry, there are just so many questions about a potential shooter at Disney World.
Yeah, well, Walt Disney World engages and has off-duty Orange County police officers on site, on property all the time.
Love it.
So our security is there to surveil and just make sure and watch. And if we need additional assistance from law enforcement, they are there, very quickly. Because like I said, we always have them on site. And they're available to us to be paid on overtime working for Walt Disney World.
And so let's jump to the tragic incident with the gator a few years ago and that poor child. There was never an incident for many, many, many decades. Not one incident with the gators. Why do you think that happened? Was it just a freak incident?
Well, to your point, I thought when I first heard that happened, I thought it was a hoax. I just thought that couldn't have happened. It's never happened. People like that. But what I've learned is, in a big place, like Disney, there's the 1 in a million, there's the 1 in 100 million, there's a 1 in a billion. Everything can happen.
Sure.
If the stars align and all the things come together in that one split second. Almost anything can happen in any area. And it just happened that for, 40 plus years, there was never a moment where you had the time of day, the alligator nearby, a child so small near the wall. I mean, like I said, that had just not all come into focus. And in hindsight, when something like that happens in hindsight, you kind of say, well, gosh, could we have known that? And you can say, well, yeah, we could have put signs. You always go back and look at, okay, what could we have seen this earlier and identified it? I'm not saying it's kind of like 9/11, but imagine if TSA was put in place before 9/11. People never would have done it. They wouldn't have paid all that money. They wouldn't have gone through the hassle. And afterwards, people are willing to accept that because they now know the risk is there. So, the key to a lot of this operations is a big part of my job was to play the what if game. What if this happened? How would we respond? If this happened, what would be the severity of it? And once you start putting those scenarios together, you can get ahead of a lot of things. And unfortunately, you can't always get all the way there. And that's what happened at Walt Disney World. We just did not foresee that could be something that could happen. It was a very sad moment. And, obviously Disney's gone back and put lots of barriers and signs and lots of communication in place now to prevent that from happening in the future.
Yeah. Well, moving back to one other death, the brain amoeba, is that what shut down the water park attraction that, has been so famously abandoned for something like 20 years now? It's there was
yeah, I know about the amoeba thing. That happens. You hear about that in Orlando every once in a while. To tell you the truth, I doubt it. I think just, River Country was one of the first water parks, and it had gotten outdated, and then Typhoon Lagoon was built, and eventually, and I think just people wanted something else. And, when you have a moment like that, you can say, well, do we want to re-update this whole thing, or do we just want to move on? And obviously, River Country was a fantastic place, but it had pretty limited access. It's hard to get to. And I think it was a big operational decision because although there's no swimming at Walt Disney World, we still have wakeboarders and, there's activities in the water. If we thought there was a real chance of people you have to be in really standing water that gets really hot over time to have that amoeba issue emerge. But obviously we pay attention to it and we let people know, but there's no swimming in the lakes there, but there is activity. So I think it had its moment. And instead of refurbishing it, the company decided to go and build something bigger. And ironically, a lot of times building something brand new on a greenfield is cheaper than going back and trying to upgrade something that already
without
has
a doubt.
Infrastructure.
People don't realize how expensive it is to renovate old buildings opposed to building new ones. It's always generally much easier.
Exactly.
So how about the island across from, that was the adventure island where you kept the animals? Is there a plan for that in the future?
I came across a few conversations at points in my career about what we would do with Discovery Island in the future. And there was once again, it was a really cool concept. It was a really cool place to get. But when you look at 50 million people visiting Walt Disney World every year, the percentage of people who could get to Discovery Island, it just wasn't worth the operation. It was so isolated. And so once it closed, there was a lot of ideas that have come up. What if you built we already have the wedding pavilion. What if you built a honeymoon island and had like a house there or two houses where people could go have their honeymoon? And, at the end of the day, when you run the numbers, you look at the investment, you look at the return on investment, the amount of money you'd have to charge for something like that just would be astronomical to make any sense. So I'm sure there's been lots of drawings. I'm sure at Walt Disney Imagineering, there are stacks of paper with all the concepts that have been thought about there. And I would have no doubt that one day they're going to bring something back there. It's just a matter of time until they figure out what that could be. That could be a great experience for people, but also be a financially smart investment to make.
Well, Dan, which day of the year?
And I have one more story for you, Alex.
Oh, please, I'd love to hear it. Yes.
I got one more. Yeah. Well, while we're talking about this, the Seven Seas Lagoon side, you have the Polynesian Hotel. And your listeners may know about this, but back in the day, the chairman of parks was a guy named Dick Nunes. And he had known Walt Disney. He grew up in the company, and he was a big part of the growth of the company. And he was he was a football player, college football player, and he also was a big surfer. And this is the story I heard. So I heard he just said, you know what, let's have surfing at the Polynesian, just like you would in Hawaii. In Polynesia, people surf, so why don't we have that here? And they said, well, Dick, that's fine, but there's no tide, there's no waves. And they said, well, let's build a wave machine. So they actually built probably about 100, 150 yards off the shoreline of the Polynesian, a machine that would push water and create waves. And they got it all installed, got it up and running. They went to do a test for it on the first wave that came in, washed away half the beach of the Polynesian, and they shut it off and never turned it on again. And now it's probably one of the best areas if you ever go bass fishing at Walt Disney World. A lot of time the guides will take you to that area because all the infrastructure underneath is a great shaded area for bass to sit and feed and sleep and do what they do. But that was one of the things I think when they first opened, I'd heard that story.
Yeah, there's a lot of fishing at Walt Disney World. People don't realize it's a very popular attraction there. So which day of the year is the quietest? If I want to visit and just have the least amount of crowds.
It's great fishing.
So which day is the quietest?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Which day of the year is the quietest for a family to visit, would you say?
Gosh, well, Disney, the purpose of a big place like Disney is to have it full all the time. And so that's why you see things. It used to be the fall. And then we introduced, the Food and Wine Festival at Epcot and the Halloween parties at the Magic Kingdom. In early December, we started doing the Christmas parties. And then any weekends that were slower, we introduced marathons and had those events in place. So it's I don't know if that's going to change, but I would say probably right after Christmas. Most people can't come right after Christmas because their kids are back in school and there, but that first month of January is usually a pretty good time. There's a little bit of time between maybe before spring break, after some of the holidays there. But the rest of the time, it runs at a pretty steady pace throughout the year. And, the 2 weeks of Christmas, were the 1 week of Christmas and the 1 week of usually spring break and Easter were the big ones, although those are starting to spread out also. But Christmas week by far is where we're definitely the busiest leading up to New Year's Eve. But I would, it's not as easy to find a slow time at Disney anymore. But certainly if you look at those off-peak periods after the holidays, I think that's a good time to come. If you're able to pull your kids out of school, tell the teacher that they'll do that. When I was little and my parents took me on vacation, I had to do a journal. That was my homework. And so we were able to do that. But as I got older, obviously you can't miss as much school.
No, you can't. It's getting tougher these days. So are there any hidden nooks, secrets in the Magic Kingdom that most people don't know about?
Gosh, that's a tough one. I'm thinking about, when I used to walk and go through, I don't know if there's any secret places there. It's such a busy place to go. I know there's some great areas if you want to relax. One of them, I think a lot of parents, and if you go online, you'll see this is a recommendation. If you go to the Dumbo attraction and you don't get a fast pass and go in the standby line, you can go inside that nice air-conditioned circus tent, plug in your phone to charge, and let your kids play on the playground as long as you want. That's a nice little area.
Anyway.
Someone's at the door.
Yeah, no, the dog likes to bark at everything. But anyway, yeah. Well, this was a wonderful conversation. I'll let you go on that note, Dan. Thank you so much, and you stay safe during these crazy times. Okay.